My name is Margie, and I'm originally from Michigan in America, but I've been living in Britain for 25 years. I've lived in New York City for 10 years. I've lived outside of Boston for 4 years. I lived in France for a year, and Britain is my home now. And these are my cats. Right now, I would say I am entering my third act of my life. I'm almost 60, and I have started a business making and hand painting shells. And I've kind of created it out of the COVID pandemic, something I started during COVID, and now it's taken off, and it's what I'm doing now. And we shall see how it goes and how long I continue to do it. But it's really a nice adventure to create something new. What is my favorite color? If I had to pick one, I would probably say a variation of blue, probably like my earrings. But I have to admit, I think it really changes based on my mood. I really do like brighter colors, if that's any help. But I do think that colors are reflective of how you're feeling, and my favorite color changes. Oh goodness, my favorite music. My husband calls it, screaming banshee music or something, because I like kind of folk music. Joni Mitchell, the Indigo Girls, James Taylor. I like a lot of 70s music, which is probably showing my age. And so I listen to a lot of older music. My husband is much more contemporary and likes the latest things, and I always go back to my old folk music. Goodness, so starting with the shells, my project, what I'm doing now, for 20 years I worked in television news production and broadcasting. And then I retrained as a teacher when I had my daughter, and then I started working for a family magazine, and then I did marketing. And over COVID, I needed something to keep myself busy, and it just so happened I managed to go home to visit my mother, and I saw in a window some hand-painted shells, and I thought, these are really beautiful. Maybe I could try and do something. And that weekend there was a car boot sale, and someone was selling 20 scallop shells for $5. So I bought them all, and both of my nieces are very artistic and had loads of arts and crafts materials. And we didn't want to go out very much. We wanted to stay in. I was in Michigan to visit my mother. So we just spent the next week crafting at the table. And we started painting and gluing and decoupaging and making things out of the shells to keep ourselves busy. And then I made it back to the UK, and I brought some supplies with me, and we went into a second lockdown. And during the first lockdown, my daughter and I knit fingerless mitts for everybody. And we just knit, and we would post them off to people and say, thinking of you, hope you're okay. So during the second lockdown, I started making shells. And then I started posting them off to people and saying, thinking of you and hope you're okay. And so I did that really as a way to not kill my family, to have some space to myself to do something. And when lockdown was over, I found that a couple of the companies I'd been consulting with had gone out of business with COVID. And I thought, do I want to start over again? Do I want to do this again? And I'd reinvented myself many times before. So I said to my husband, maybe I can sell these. So I went into a local shop, and I took some in, and I asked if she would like to try and sell them. And she was really lovely. And she said, oh yes, I'll take 12 of them. And I suddenly was so panicked at the idea that someone would pay me for something. What if they didn't sell, and then it was money she lost? And so I said, well, take them on consignment, and if they sell, then great. And if they don't sell, then you never have to pay me. And I gave her 15, and she called me a week later and said, I've sold 12, I need more. So she's still one of my best customers, and now I sell my shells in 3 shops in America, 3 shops in Scotland, 2 shops in London, and I do Greenwich Market 2 days a week. So I get to interact with people and talk to people about what designs they like, get their feedback, and just kind of do something new, do something creative before I retire. Or maybe I won't retire. Maybe I'll just do something else creative. And thankfully, people seem to like them. Okay, so something that working with the oysters has taught me. Oysters grow in layers. So you have a layer of shell and a layer of shell, and they grow thicker and more protective. But I can look at these oysters and I can tell you how they lived. So if you look at this oyster, it's very smooth. There's not very much going on. It's perfectly nice, but it's not very interesting. Whereas this oyster and this oyster have what I call these ruffles or these ribbons, where you can see all of these movement almost. And I can tell you that this oyster lived in very calm waters. He lived a perfectly fine, probably slightly boring little oyster life. Not much happened, the water just kind of caressed it gently. However, these oysters, they had to fight. The pressure of the water was pushing on them. The water was cascading over them. And each one of these ripples and ruffles is representative of the waves it had to fight to grow and had to push back. So even though these oysters lived a much harder life and had to fight to push against the pressure and fight to grow, I can tell by looking at them they're much more interesting oysters. So the thing is that you can live your life watching telly all day and sitting in your house wrapped in bubble wrap, not doing very much, not interacting with your neighbors or your friends, or you can go out and challenge yourself, face some adversity, help other people, and you're a much more interesting oyster. So I love that these being from nature, we're all natural things. And even though good things happen and bad things happen, it makes you more interesting, just like the oysters. So my favorite story from my childhood is probably going to be when I was 6 years old at the local park community area. They had a big festival and they were selling raffle tickets that if you could win a trip to Las Vegas and you could win like a shopping spree and different things. But in order to get people to sell the tickets, they would tell you that if you sold a winning ticket, you would win a prize too. So if you sold the grand prize for the trip to Las Vegas, you would win a tandem bicycle. And I was 6 years old and I just thought a tandem was the coolest thing ever. So I said to my mommy, I'm going to win this tandem bicycle. And for the entire summer, I just kept saying, I'm going to win this bicycle. And this was in the age when if you were 6 years old, your mom would say, go off. And I would go knock on strangers' doors and say, I'm selling raffle tickets and do you want to buy them? And I spent probably 6 weeks selling raffle tickets. And the day that it came, my brother, who was 10 at the time, walked me down to the park so they could do the raffle draw. And they pulled the prizes and they finally get to the top prize. And they say that Mr. B. Smith won the trip to Las Vegas. And I turned to my brother and I said, I sold a ticket to a Smith. And my brother looks at me like, okay, you know, Smith, it's kind of a common name. And then they announced the seller, which was me. And I won the tandem bike. And I just remember my brother lifting me up in the air. And he was 10 and I was 6. And people were cheering, and he took me up to the stage, and they put me on the bike. And my brother called my mother from a payphone and said, Margie won the bike, Margie won the bike. And my mother said, ha, 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 you know, it's almost dinner time, you need to come home. And so we rode the bike up from the park, and my brother was like this because he's 10 and I'm in the back. And we're riding in front of the house, and my mother comes out, and she says, oh, very funny, take it back to whoever's it is. And we had to convince her I'd really won the bike. So I think from a young age, I think I kind of realized if you really want something, I know it was chance that I won it, but the fact is I did sell 200 tickets. And for a 6-year-old to sell 200 tickets was a big deal. And I think if you really push yourself and you really try something, you can achieve something. And that's been something that has been seared into my mind. And it's kind of how I've lived my life. The worst thing in my life was my father died when I was 15. And he got very sick when I was about 8. He got pneumonia and double pneumonia. which turned into viral pneumonia, and he ended up being diagnosed with viral cardiomyopathy, which basically means the virus gets into the heart muscles. And even though they can cure the virus, he was cured of the pneumonia, once it's in the muscles, it will continue to deteriorate the muscles. And so he was given 2 years to live. And he did manage to live another 7 or 8 years. He said, no, I've got 4 children to get through school, so it's not gonna happen. But I was 15, and that was very young. But I think also, I believe very strongly that the things that happen to us shape who we are, and you can't change what happens to you. And so I'm very appreciative of the time I have with people and friends and family, and I don't take for granted what we have today versus tomorrow. And I was shown such support by my community and my friends. I always try and support others and support the community, and I do a lot of volunteer work, and I try to help make things better. My journey is unique to me, but it's not unique to everybody else, because everybody has their journey. Everybody has their struggle and their problems, and how you face them is what defines you. You know, my daughter has ADHD and some processing issues and anxiety, and she struggled a lot during COVID and has struggled academically and took a year off and is now just doing phenomenally well. And sometimes she looked at me and said, why me? Why is this happening to me? And I had to say to her, why not you? These things happen. Everybody has their thing. And sometimes it's very visible. Sometimes it's a disability, or sometimes it's, you can see what's going on, or it's a very obvious thing, okay? Like even my dad dying, it was a thing. People knew that my dad had died. For other people, it's something invisible. You don't know it, and their life may look perfect and it may look great, but everybody has the thing. Probably the most exciting thing that's happened to me would be having my daughter, because we had to do IVF 4 times to get her. And then we also did IVF 4 times after, and it didn't work. So she was a unique opportunity to have the joy and the drama and the difficulties, and just really knowing that I'd finally had a family after always wanting a child, and having this beautiful daughter who never ceases to amaze me in her resilience and her beauty and her kindness and her empathy. So I'm very proud, and that's probably my big moment. And the happiest moment in my life, aside from my daughter, which was also exciting but also happy, would probably have to be moving here with my fiance, who's my now husband, with this sense of adventure of starting a new life somewhere in a new country, with a partner that we had devoted ourselves to each other. That was an incredibly happy and exciting moment. And that would have to be, and more so than my wedding, because the wedding was just part of it. It was about this new life. It was about starting something and building something together with someone. Life for me is really about people. And I find right now, I don't watch the news very much. I read the news because I like to control what I read. I don't like screaming heads telling me what's going on and these aggressive voices. And it's really about community and connecting with people around me, whether they be friends or neighbors, people that I meet while I'm at the market, or making shells for. It's about contributing to community. It's about being a part of your world. And that's not to say I'm not aware of the bigger world. I am. But I have zero impact on the presidential elections. I have zero impact on whether or not the war stops in Ukraine. But I can have an impact in my community and in the people around me. So life for me is really trying to make a better place, or try and be a better person in my community, in my world, small as it might be.